Welcome to Lesson 25 in our study of the book of Revelation as a part of the prophecy series. Today we're going to continue looking at the text itself. We're going to be up to chapter 18, and we're going to be looking at what John was shown concerning the destruction of the kingdom of the beast. If you remember, when we were in chapter 16 with the pouring out of the bowls of divine wrath, it was said after the seventh bowl, that was it. And now we're ready for Jesus to come back. Now, when we came to chapter 17 and chapter 18, we're seeing the discussion of what has taken place with those final judgments on the kingdom of the beast. So in chapter 17, we focused in on the religious system of that kingdom that has existed for 2,500 years. We're now going to see the destruction of the city of influence, which, by the way, if you remember, the last verse of chapter 17 says that the whore was a great city. And so we're going to see that destruction today. So we're going to focus in on Revelation chapter 18, verses 1 to 24, the fall of Babylon, part 2. So again, we're going to take this into several different parts here. And so let's focus in on the first part, which is Revelation chapter 18, verses 1 to 3, the fall of Babylon. Now, I want you to notice what the text is telling us here. Look with me at verse 1. After this, I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having a great authority. And the earth was made bright with his glory. And he called out with a mighty voice, "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. She has become a dwelling place of demons, a haunt for every unclean spirit, a haunt for every unclean bird, a haunt for every unclean and detestable beast. For all the nations have drunk the wine of the passion of her sexual immorality, and the kings of the earth have committed immorality with her. And the merchants of the earth have grown rich from the power of her luxurious living." All right, so let's take this first part here in verses 1 to 3, and we're going to divide it into several sections. So I want you to notice with me chapter 18, verse 1, the angel from heaven. So here's what I want you to see that John is made aware of. John sees a great angel with authority descend from heaven. So he sees this great angel and the appearance of this great angel who has great authority ascend from heaven. Now, when we come to chapter 18, verses 2 to 3, we see the angel's pronouncement. We're going to see what this angel proclaims. So what I want you to notice is this. The angel proclaims the fall of the great city Babylon. Now, I just want to remind you, Babylon, we're not just talking about Babylon that King Nebuchadnezzar ruled, which lies in ruins right now in the nation of Iraq. Babylon has become a symbol throughout the scripture of the world empire that currently rules. So if you remember, Peter talks about that he is writing in his epistle from Babylon. He was actually writing from Rome, but he refers to Rome by this spiritual name. Now you could say, well, this obviously is the fall of Rome. No. I want you to understand, whatever is the ruling empire at that time, which would be in the tribulational period, ruled by the Antichrist, that is spiritually Babylon, no matter if it has another name. Spiritually, it's Babylon. Now, let's come now to the second section of these verses that we're looking at today. And we're going to notice in chapter 18, verses 4 to 5, a call to leave the city. There's a call for people to depart. So I want you to notice what verse 4 says. Then I heard another voice from heaven saying, "Come out of her, my people, lest you take part in her sins, lest you share in her plagues. for her sins are heaped high as heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. Now, here's what I want you to notice. We're going to take this into several sections as we look at these two verses. First of all, when we come to chapter 18, verse 4, we see the call to leave. So I want you to notice that there is something that's being uttered to certain people within this city that's going to be destroyed. So what I want you to see is this. A voice from heaven calls the people of God to leave the city, meaning destruction is coming. Now, I want you to think for a moment. That kind of reminds me of something that occurred in the Old Testament. If you remember, in the book of Genesis, there were some cities on the plain that were earmarked for destruction. But in the cities, there was a righteous man. Who was the righteous man? Lot. And the angels went in and took Lot and his family out of the city so that God could destroy the city with sulfur and destroy it so that it does not even exist today. So the same thing is happening here in this passage. A voice from heaven calls for the people of God to get out of this city. Don't be influenced by this city. Get out of the city because its destruction is coming. Now, when we get to chapter 18, verse 5, we see the reason. So this is the next part we want you to notice. The city is marked for destruction because of its sins. It's because of its sins that it continues to engage in, that very much they don't want to give up. The city is marked by these sins. Now, that's going to bring us to our third part in the verses that we're looking at today. So that's Revelation chapter 18, verses 6 through 8. We're going to notice judgment on the city. We're going to notice what the text says as far as what will happen to this city. So I want you to notice with me verse 6. Pay her back as she herself has paid back others, and repay her double for her deeds. Mix a double portion for her in the cup she mixed. As she glorified herself and lived in luxury, so give her a like measure of torment and mourning, since in her heart she says, I sit as a queen. I am no widow, and mourning I shall never see. For this reason her plagues will come in a single day, death and mourning and famine, and she will be burned up with fire, for mighty is the Lord God who has judged her. All right, so let's take a look at this. Several things we're going to notice here. So I want you to notice when we come to chapter 18, verse 6, we're going to see the principle of recompense. The principle of recompense. What are you talking about there? Well, if you are constantly handing out punishment on others, then that punishment is returned to you doubled. So what I want you to notice is Babylon is to receive double the affliction that she gave others. So just as she was oppressive to others and was brutal, she's going to receive that back twice. Now, notice when we get to chapter 18, verse 7, the scope of her judgment. We're going to notice how much judgment is going to take place. And so what I want you to notice is the amount of her torment will be proportionate to her wealth. So this great city has gained wealth and all of this from the oppression of others and the murder of others. And so the torment that this city and the inhabitants of this city will go through will be proportionate to that which they have acquired before. Now, how long will this judgment take place? So I want you to notice when we come to chapter 18, verse 8, we're going to see the duration of her judgment. We're going to see exactly how long will this take place. And so I want you to notice, it's actually amazing, her total destruction will occur in a single day. You say, is that possible? Yes, we've already talked about where that took place already. If you remember in Genesis, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. was in a single day, if not a single night. This total destruction will take place in a single day. Now, the interesting thing is when you come to the next part of the verses that we're looking at, and we're going to focus in on chapter 18, verses 9 through 19, we're going to see the lament over the city. Now, you would think that everybody would be excited about the destruction of this great city, this kingdom of the Antichrist, but what you're going to notice that the text is going to point out is that not everyone is happy about the destruction of this city in one single day. What do you mean? Well, notice what the text says. Look with me at verse 9. And the kings of the earth who committed sexual immorality and lived in luxury with her will weep and wail over her when they see the smoke of her burning. They will stand far off in fear of her torment and say, Alas, alas, you great city, you mighty city, Babylon, for in a single hour your judgment has come. And the merchants of the earth weep and mourn for her, since no one buys their cargo anymore. Cargo of gold, silver, jewels, pearls, fine linen, purple cloth, silk, scarlet cloth, all kinds of scented wood, all kinds of articles of ivory, all kinds of articles of costly wood, bronze, iron, and marble, cinnamon, spice, incense, myrrh, frankincense, wine, oil, fine flour, wheat, cattle and sheep, horses and chariots, and slaves, that is, human souls. The fruit for which your soul longed has gone from you, and all her delicacies and your splendors are lost to you, never to be found again. The merchants of these wares who gain wealth from her will stand far off in fear of her torment, weeping and mourning aloud. Alas, alas, for the great city that was clothed in fine linen, in purple and scarlet, adorned with gold, with jewels and with pearls. For in a single hour all this wealth has been laid waste. And all shipmasters and seafaring men, sailors, and all whose trade is on the sea, stood far off, and cried out as they saw the smoke of her burning. What city was like the great city? And they threw dust on their heads as they wept and mourned, crying out, Alas, alas, for the great city where all who had ships at sea grew rich by her wealth. For in a single hour she has been laid waste. Wow. What we're seeing here is that not everybody's going to be happy about the destruction of the city. Now, the saints will be happy. But if we're going to take the lament over the city, we're going to divide it into several parts here. I want you to notice, first of all, when we look at verses 9 through 10, the lament of the king. So we're going to notice the reaction of the governments that have been supporting the Antichrist and what their reaction is going to be when this great city is destroyed. So what I want you to notice is this. The kings who shared in the power of Babylon will grieve her destruction. So they're not going to be happy because, again, this is going to reflect on them. This power will now be taken away, so they're mourning. When we get to chapter 18, verses 11 through 16, we see the lament of the merchants. We see the cry of those who made their money from her. So what I want you to see is this. The merchants grieve the loss of commerce. And there is a whole host of products and so forth that are basically sold there that will no longer be sold there. And so they're grieving the loss of financial gain. Well, that brings us to chapter 18, verses 17 through 19. The lament of sailors, because those products have to get there somehow. What I want you to notice is that the sailors mourn the loss of income from the great city. So all of the products that were brought to this great city by sea will no longer be going by sea because the city will no longer exist. And so the money those sailors made will no longer be made. Well, that brings us to the final part of the passage that we're looking at today, and that's in Revelation chapter 18, verses 20 to 24. We see the destruction of the city. So John is going to show us the destruction. So I want you to notice with me verse 20. Here's what the text says. Rejoice over her, O heaven, and you saints and apostles and prophets, for God has given judgment for you against her. Then a mighty angel took up a stone, like a great millstone, and threw it into the sea, saying, So will Babylon the great city be thrown down with violence, and will be found no more. And the sounds of the harpists and the musicians and of the flute players and the trumpeters will be heard in you no more. And a craftsman of any craft will be found in you no more. And the sound of the mill will be heard in you no more. And the light of lamp will shine in you no more. And the voice of the bridegroom and bride will be heard in you no more. For your merchants were the great ones of the earth, and all the nations were deceived by your sorcery. And in her was found the blood of prophets and of the saints and of all who had been slain on the earth. Okay, let's look at this final section. We're going to divide it into several parts. First of all, let's notice chapter 18, verse 20. The call to rejoice. We're going to notice now the call to believers. That's who is to rejoice. Notice now, the righteous are called to rejoice over the city's destruction. Why? Because this city has been the source of pain for believers. So when we get to Revelation chapter 18, verse 21, the throwing of the great stone, we're going to notice now that there's this stone that is thrown. So notice the sudden destruction of the city is symbolized by the stone thrown into the sea, and it was thrown by a mighty angel. It's going to happen that quickly. Notice now when we get to chapter 18, verses 22 to 23, we're going to see the cessation of activity. Everything's going to stop. There won't be any more life in the city because everything will be destroyed. No longer will the city be a place of activity and commerce. It's going to be desolate. In fact, the text implies that it's not even going to be there anymore. So sure is the destruction, the city will be completely wiped out. But then, just so you understand, look with me at chapter 18, verse 24. We see the city's sin. So again, this destruction took place because of sin. Sin that was created by this city. The city is guilty of killing the people of God. This is what they're being destroyed for, is because they killed the people of God. Now, we're at a crucial moment in our study. We have witnessed from chapter 6 all the way now up to chapter 18 the judgment upon this world, and ultimately the judgment upon the beast and his kingdom. We've seen the destruction and series of judgments that have come, the seal judgments, the trumpet judgments, the bowl judgments. Now we're getting to a crucial moment, which we're going to find when we get into chapter 19. And that crucial moment is everything that the world is moving toward even right now, and that is the second coming of Jesus Christ. And so that's what we'll be focusing on in our next lesson.